Joint Legislative Management Committee. And we are here on December 12th. And we have a relatively full agenda that we're hoping to do in an hour and 15 minutes exactly. So we'll start with a couple of HR policies, proposed HR policies. And we have the Senate Secretary, John Bloomer, who is going to give us a little background for these. And then we'll hear from in-house counsel for Office of Legislative Counsel. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I included in your packet, sometimes there are newer members, so I included in the packet the statute on Title 2, Section 42, which sort of spells out some of the responsibilities that you have being on this committee. Frequently, there's sometimes confusion on different roles in different committees and how they all play and what their roles are. But you have I've tried to set up the agenda. You'll note the first series of policies actually cite 2 VSA section 42A4. And if you look at the statute, that's where you're really looking at, you adopt policies for all the employees in the building, or at least those that are joint employees. They do apply over usually to the House Clerk's office and the Senate Secretary's office, but joint management itself, the committee supervises all the common employees, which include the joint fiscal, legislative counsel, human resources, and what was also considered the operations, which you'll be discussing today and maybe approving some restructuring of that. The first couple of policies, or the first couple of things on your agenda, there are 2 policy revisions, and then there's 1 new policy. The 2 policy revisions are of existing policies. I think you'll hear from in-house counsel on this issue that while the changes that are being made are required by new statutory changes that you made in the last year. And so to have your employees have the same rights and responsibilities under the statute, that these are your sick time and leave policies are potentially being amended. There are, and then the second policy is a new policy as background. The overall cameras, there's an overall camera policy that was adopted by Joint Rules last month. Joint Rules deals with the building, the security of the building. And so that policy was put together and approved in November. Because their cameras exist, there's a potential that they may be needed or asked to be used for employment-related issues. And so what you have before you is, because you deal with employee issues, is a policy that you could adopt, which is sort of an add-on policy for the potential use of those cameras within the confines of the policy that's adopted by Joint Rules for purposes of employee issues. There has to be a couple of highlights on that, which I think Maggie will probably, Ms. Farron will probably explain a little better than I will, is that it only applies to employees themselves, and after a complaint has been done, it would permit the human resources director to look at it, or their designee, along with potentially the supervisor or director of the employees that were involved. So it's much more limited. It's within the confines of the policy that was adopted by the Joint Rules. And last thing I'll say before I sort of allow you, allow is not the right word, have Maggie come up and answer any questions you have, is you'll see in your package, you also have some motions. The first couple are probably fairly straightforward. Those are suggested language. If after you've had your discussion on the revision policies, you're just really adopting the different revised policies. And then if you decide to adopt a new policy on cameras, it would be adopting that new policy. So I guess I'll move over. There's the second chair. I'll maybe kind of sit up.
I'll sit as far away from everybody else as possible.
Are you not feeling well?
I came down with something.
Okay. Well, welcome, Maggie Farron, in-house counsel for Office of Legislative Counsel.
Okay, so the first 2 policies, as Secretary Bloomer mentioned, are revisions of the leave of absence policy and the earned sick time policy to reflect changes that were made this past session in Act 73 to the unpaid leave entitlements for employees in the state of Vermont. And the first policy, leaves of absence policy, talks about when employees are entitled to take time off. And this can be paid if they have accrued time But employees are entitled to be absent from work without any consequence to their employment under these circumstances. And what we did was we just added the new provisions and definitions from Act 73.
Is it excellent? I thought that was the education.
Education.
Totally is. You're right. It's Act 32.
Got it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know why I'd be thinking about that. Okay, so what we did was we added the safe leave provision from Act 32, which is for situations of stalking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And it allows people to take their 12 weeks of unpaid leave. There are 2 weeks of bereavement leave for the death of a family member. We added crime victim leave, which existed before, and employees were entitled to before. We just folded it into this policy for employees and management ease. We changed the definition of family member. We expanded it as it was expanded in Act 32. It just covers a couple more sort of relationships for employees and enables them to take leave. And I think that's about it. We were careful to, make sure that we were being as broad as possible while still ensuring equity. But this largely was just a change from the statute. So if there are questions about the leave of absence policy, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions for Ms. Farrar? Okay, I do not see any online. I do not see any in the room. Any questions about the earned sick time? Okay, people have, I think, had a look at these prior. So in the absence of discussion, I would ask for a motion.
I move adoption of the revised leaves of absence policy. Do you want
Okay,
them
so
separate or one at a time?
let's do one at a time.
Okay.
So Speaker Krawinski has moved the adoption of the revised leave of absence policy. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take the roll. And who would call the roll?
You may, or I have one ready if need be.
Would you mind calling?
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson, Senator Beck,
Yes.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Representative Korinsky,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
701.
Thank you for that. And now I would, again, in the absence of further discussion, I would welcome a motion on earned sick time policy.
I move adoption of the revised earned sick time policy.
Okay, Speaker Krawinski has moved adoption. Any discussion? Seeing none, I would ask the Secretary to call the roll.
Senator Clarkson, Senator Beck,
Yes.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof,
Yes.
Representative Wood,
Yes.
Representative Speaker Krawinski,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
701.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you to Arlene and her department for revising those according to statute. That moves us to section B on the agenda. New policy on use of security camera footage by the Legislative Office of Human Resources. And I'll ask John for some background.
So generally speaking, as I sort of mentioned earlier, there's a policy that exists. We backtrack 2 steps. There are cameras that have been in the building, in use and sometimes not in use for a while. As time has evolved, the necessity for security has increased. Going back about, maybe 2 or 3 years, there was a grant that allowed additional cameras to be installed outside and inside. That's within the purview of the Joint Rules Committee. The Joint Rules Committee approved those installations. Before they could be turned on, there needed to be a policy adopted as to what happened with the, pardon me, with the video and how you would operate them. That policy was adopted in November. You do have that in your packet. I gave you that as background if there were kind of questions as to what the underlying policy is. You're not really here to approve or worry too much about that policy because that is within the joint rules purview, once again, because it deals with the security overall for the building. And then because the cameras actually exist, there is at least some concern that if it's not available for issues of employment, when there's a conflict, either with an employee or something an employee reports, how do you substantiate it and what does that kind of create any kind of exposure? So there's a policy that's been drafted up, which would permit under certain circumstances, the Office of Human Resources to review or to be a individual who could look at the tapes or the videos that are preserved. There has to be a complaint that has been filed. It has to be between an employee. As I mentioned earlier, the viewing of the video is fairly restricted. It has to be the Human Resources director or designee, along with potentially the director of that employee who's involved. It doesn't change, just for some background that you may be interested in. The cameras themselves are used for security. There are a number of them. The reason that the Sergeant at Arms is here is to answer questions if you have sort of on where locations are and stuff, but there's quite a few of them inside the building and outside. Once more, that policy is not for you to decide, but you may want to know where they are. They are all visual. Do not take audio, from my understanding. There is a control room where all the video feed basically goes into, and it's used for security purposes. The video is retained for up to 14 days under the joint rules policy, so that if there's a complaint, it can still be retrieved, but it's not kept forever. It's not kept for extended period of time unless there is a complaint. And then if it's kind of pulled out, I think it has to be a security investigation. It's not just somebody wants to see the tape. It has to be an active security investigation to have it sort of tagged. This would permit a kind of a tag-along policy by Human Resources. If they suddenly had a complaint, they could notify the Capitol Police to retain a particular footage. It does not permit the Human Resources to go in and watch cameras to see what's happening. There has to be an active complaint that's filed involving the employee. And so it would be during those 14-day window where they could go in and view it to see if it resolved factual questions, if there was some kind of dispute. The underlying operation of the cameras do permit the security to watch and see live. That's one of the benefits of it, is they can see who's in the building, how it's flowing, and make sure that that there's security for all the legislators and the public that are in the building. So that's sort of background. This policy has been drafted to try to be as somewhat restrictive, but also allow it to be used if needed for controversies that affect your employees.
So I have Ms. Ferran on the witness list, but I also have Sergeant at Arms. I don't know if there's a particular order you all would prefer. Well, since you're at the table, what would you like to add?
So I think the only thing I would add is that this is really about fairness, because there are circumstances in which the Human Resources Department will have to make a decision to act or not act in a way that will affect someone's employment. And in order to really be fair, and this is certainly the court's preference, it's important to have all of the available information just to find out what happened. And any sort of decision that would follow thereafter would be separate, just based on sort of a body of evidence. So that's all that I would add.
That's a good question. So based on that, so if there is a decision made that affects somebody's employment or disciplinary action or something like that, this doesn't seem to allow the employee or their representative to review that information, which may contribute to the decision that's made. Is that appropriate? I guess, is that the question? It's my question. It seems as though they should have access to information that on which a decision is being made.
I think it depends. There are circumstances in which that would be totally appropriate. For example, like a performance thing, like, oh, here's something that we noticed that wasn't done correctly, right? And so let's review it. And here's how we can do it differently the next time. And then there are some circumstances, I think, in which that wouldn't be appropriate.
But the policy as written doesn't allow for it, doesn't allow in any circumstance at this point in time, the way it's written, for an employee or their representative to view the tape.
I'm not, this is not my area of expertise, but I think it answers your question, Representative Wood. I think it's the last paragraph, and maybe Megan can help us with that. It says the footage retained out of the investigation may be released under the same circumstances as any other record of an employee investigation. So I think that language was in there to sort of address what could be done, and this tape would be dealt the same whether it was a written or whether it was some other kind of thing that went into an investigation or someone's personnel file. And once again, Maggie can correct me, but I think that was the whole idea of if there's a suit, there's an investigation, if your concern is whether or not it can be obtained through some kind of civil process, it would be the same as any other record. This tape, if it was retained, would be available. I believe that is correct.
And I have a question, Ms. Ferran, about what you just said. It seemed as though you were saying HR could use footage as a tool to correct people in how they're handling workplace procedure. But if I'm reading this right, it would only be as part of an investigation into someone's behavior. So it wouldn't be an instructional tool necessarily.
Not necessarily true. I mean, not unless the sort of underlying performance concern were the source of whatever the controversy was.
I see. So back to Secretary Bloomer's point, if it could be released under other circumstances, this would also be able to be released and seen by the individual. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's great. The other, the trigger is a complaint that's filed against a legislative employee. It's on page 2, the use of the recorded camera footage, or it's a complaint of a conduct of a legislative employee. At that point, it could be used for some sort of improvement policy. You find out something's done, somebody complains that an employee was exceedingly rude, somebody from outside, that would allow potentially allow the camera footage to be looked at. And in that sense, once it's been retained under this policy, it would potentially permit improvement steps to be taken based upon what was seen.
And I'm remembering in the first policy, the basic policy that we're adding to, there was a process whereby I think it was after 6 months, anybody retaining footage was required to re-examine it and determine whether it was still needed to be kept. Is that included here as well, John?
That what policy you're looking at is it is included. It's a data retention procedure, which is paragraph Roman numeral 5, which requires the chief of police to periodically review every 6 months.
Right.
Let's see.
And that would go along here too.
I'm just trying to see if I can find exactly where it is. Sorry, Senator. It's second to last paragraph. Sorry. It doesn't really have the limitation period. It talks about the legislative human resources retains it as long as it's useful for the purposes of the investigation. I don't believe that there's a portion that says it has to be reviewed every 6 months, but it would be page 2 of the policy you're looking at. It's paragraph 3. There are 4 major paragraphs in that. Part 3, there's the security camera one, the director, and then the next one talks about after review of the security camera footage in question, the Director of Office of Legislative Human Resources retains the footage as part of an investigation for as long as useful for the purposes of the investigation, which would lead it to be that if it was, at least my interpretation, when it's no longer useful, it has to be not retained.
I guess it would come down to what we mean by useful. Suppose director of HR said it's always useful to have footage in case something happens in the future. So I'm just gonna always keep it. Would that be allowed under this policy?
Short, there's always two answers to everything, Senator, as you know. The short answer is yes, it probably would. The longer answer is if that was occurring, you would be able to modify this procedure and policy to address abuse of the policy. But it is ambiguous as to, there's not a standard. One of the problems with putting in a definitive standard is sometimes the straitjacket doesn't work. And so this particular language is more general, but it could be potentially indefinitely done if.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to revisit this like other policies later. Senator Lyons, my apologies, I didn't see your hand up.
Well, you actually hit on, with this conversation, my question regarding for the length of time and the usefulness for an investigation. And it raises the issue about procedures for investigating and who's in charge. In this paragraph, it gives, as you have alluded to or suggested, Senator Baruth, it does suggest a lot of authority and responsibility and power on the part of the human resources. So I feel uncomfortable with the sort of that particular paragraph. Understanding that different investigations have different procedures and different issues associated. The other issue that's raised is we're talking about employees accessing an employee personnel file. Access is one thing. It could be that an employee accesses to the point of recording or taking hold of in some way the recording and using it publicly and punitively. And I think we're trying to avoid public exposure for these recordings. And if I'm wrong with that assumption, let me know. I see our lawyer looking confused, but no, it's just a concern. What is the extent to access that the employee has?
Would you like
Two
to?
questions there. One is on process, procedures, and human resources, knowing we'll probably come back to that discussion, and maybe clarify a little bit about the security of the footage and how it is not, is or is not allowed to move into the public domain. That's it.
I think I can definitely answer the second question. So as with any other piece of an investigation, any video footage that was retained would stay in the investigatory file, which is not a part of an employee's personnel file. So we keep, when we do an investigation, obviously there can be very sensitive things, not just about the employee who may have been the subject of the investigation, but also the person who made the complaint or the witnesses. So we keep those documents separate and not accessible to employees, unless and until it's released as, suppose somebody were subject to an adverse action and brought a claim, then the file might be released, frequently subject to a confidentiality agreement. But employees themselves would not have access to this footage as a part of a personnel file. So, if somebody were to say, can I please have a copy of my I-9? Sure. But if somebody were to say, can I please have a copy of the footage that was used in an investigation? Probably not. And so it wouldn't go anywhere.
If there were a lawyer involved and the lawyer asked for it?
Then it probably would be released. It's just, we do frequently get a confidentiality agreement. So this will only be used for this purpose. And it would be treated like any other piece of investigatory material.
Thank you.
To the other point about as long as it's useful for the purposes of the investigation, this is page 2 of the 4th paragraph from the bottom. So I'm wondering if it would be possible to amend this, and I would propose saying will retain footage in a secure location as a part of the investigation for as long as it is useful for the purposes of the investigation, comma, but under no circumstance after the conclusion of the investigation.
We like to keep, well, I think we have to keep investigatory materials for at least as long as the statute of limitations extends for whatever were to occur. So if an employee were to have an adverse employment action, their statute of limitations to bring, say, a discrimination claim is 3 years.
But
So-
then, I'm sorry to
No.
interrupt, but then aren't we, that was kind of my hypothetical. If the director of HR said it's useful to keep these into the future, if I understand you right, you're saying HR would have a 3-year retention policy.
It's such a complicated question because of records retention generally for the branch and how we work with Visara, with the archives. What I can say is we would not dispose of any of this material before the expiration of the statute of limitations.
See, that's something that I think should have been spelled out here. Especially since we have a 14-day policy generally, but we're saying 3 years for HR. That gives anybody who complains about anything a very broad window in which they can keep this footage in circulation. Thoughts on that around the table? John?
Just to try to help. Sometimes I make it more confusing. There are really there are 3 different things going on here. One of them is the 14 days is if there's not a request, whether it be by the Capitol Police or whether it be by Human Resources, the tape's gone. If there's no request, it doesn't really get saved. At this point, the policy is 14 days. That could be changed at some point by joint rules. There are, just so you know, there are some technological issues. You can't keep storing all this stuff forever. But if there's a request within the 14 days, then it's sort of tagged. The question, as you're, I think, trying to struggle with or figure out is, there's an adverse, something that happens. That really completes the investigation. And the language you sort of are proposing would be, all right, it's been completed. There's been a sanction. Something's been done. Investigation's over. The video should be destroyed under sort of the language you were using. The problem becomes I don't like it and I go to a lawyer and 2 years later I sue and then I say that tape would make sure that I was innocent. And it's gone if you destroy it within the statute. And the problem also with just doing a strong 3-year is that, does that mean it has to get rid of it even if there's a suit? I mean, if you're, I'm playing, let's say solo in center field on this one. So, or basketball all alone against 5 or 6 people. If you're interested in going forward with the policy, it's conceivable you could put some date in that you revisit later on. If that makes you comfortable to pass the policy today. You know, if you pass it today with its investigation and then as an outside limit of 3 years, you can definitely look at it within the 3 years, the time frame. But once again, that is really playing solo. Is a potential suggestion if you decide to go forward today. If you don't, then you can always revisit the policy in the future.
Senator Lyons, I saw your hand.
Oh, thank you. So if we did that, if we added the 3-year provision and coming back to it, I should have asked the question backwards. We need some kind of policy because we are putting cameras in place. So we need something going forward for the session. And this could be the remedy. We'll still have to come back to it. I agree with Senator Bruce on this one. The 3 years could become problematic. And so just a thought, we need it. So maybe we move forward and come back to it pretty quickly.
Well, this is very hypothetical as far as I'm concerned. I would be all right with okaying this policy and having an understanding that JLMC will get a report a year down the road. And Arlene can come and tell us how many pieces of video they're archiving, how many investigations are ongoing concerning those pieces, just so we don't lose sight of it. And I'm confident that the committee and our staff can keep us on track with that promise without necessarily putting it in. Would others be comfortable with that?
Sounds good to me.
Speaker, you'd be comfortable? Okay. If that's the case, are there other questions about the policy? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion on the camera policy.
I move adoption of the use of security camera footage by the Legislative Office of Human Resources policy.
Speaker has made a motion to approve adoption. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the secretary to call the roll.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof, Representative Wood,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson, Senator Beck, Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Speaker Kowinski,
Yes.
Senator Baruth.
Yes.
503.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to oversight and management functions and a word from Secretary Blumer on those. And then I'd ask the Sergeant at Arms to come to the table as well. Welcome to come now if you like. John.
Thank you. So the second series are your oversight and management functions. There are 2 or 3 different functions you have. One of them is approving the addition of new employees, part-time or full-time positions within this building that are used by overall the legislature. The other one is you are to approve any sort of reallocation or the structure itself. That would be the second topic, which we will get to. And then the third topic is you're supposed to be proposing sort of a legislative branch budget. And so those will be the next 3. The first one that you have before you is a request by the Sergeant at Arms for a position. I'm going to make sure I get this right. It's a part-time year-round unbenefited position for the use of the Sergeant at Arms as a head tour guide. And for the explanation of that, the Sergeant at Arms, Ms. Kessler, is here.
Thank you. And would it be okay to also invite David Sheets, State Curator, to the
Absolutely.
conversation? Thank you, David, if you wouldn't mind joining us. And I invite David because although this position sits with the legislative branch of government and would report to the Visitor Services Coordinator, which I'd also like to introduce Holly Taylor, reintroduce Holly Taylor. Not everyone knows Holly, but she is our Visitor Services Coordinator. David and I really collaborate on visitor services. It's a shared service between the curator's office and the Sergeant at Arms office. So David has a lot to offer to the conversation. So Secretary Blumer is correct. This is a part-time position, unbenefited. The title is head tour guide. I will just say, I'm going to turn over to David, but I'll just say that the building has, from my perspective, Sergeant at Arms, 3 kind of very different uses. One is as the legislative operations. This is where the legislature sits. This is where we meet. We're very lucky to use our historic building for that purpose. It's also, the second purpose is almost like a conference center. There are lots of outside groups that come in and do work in this building, reserve it for trainings, for meetings. And the third purpose, which is very important, is for education. It's for visitors. It's for people who come to the building year round. So when you aren't here aren't here full time in the summer and the fall, especially in the fall, we have thousands of visitors coming to the State House. And we are able to offer a tour for those visitors, for school groups, for all different kinds of groups. So this position would support our tour program. So David, if you have just a few minutes to add to kind of what the program is.
The State House, I think we all can acknowledge, is a museum, has been a museum at least for the last 40 years that I've been here. That work has built a program largely using volunteers, and we have had in the past in excess of 100 of those volunteers per year. Since the pandemic, we lost a lot of those volunteers, and building back over the course of the last couple of years, we have found it still to be a challenge to find enough volunteers to keep our program enlivened. And I would say, I want to hasten to add that we get over 150,000 visitors per year. Only the Shelburne Museum and Ben & Jerry's are in that category throughout the entire state of Vermont in terms of visitors. But we are by far, including the Shelburne Museum, the largest site for school visits by far. And most museums, such as the Shelburne, have actual departments of educators who help deliver what they need to deliver. In the last few years, we have beefed up our civics education program in a major way. We give what is called the Big Idea Tour to all school groups who come. They bring an idea that is drafted into a bill, and within 45 minutes, it passes both houses and is signed into law by the governor. 45 minutes, just putting it out there.
Something to
The whole idea is for them to come with their idea because we want them to be fully engaged when they are here. This is not the kind of tour that any volunteer can give, especially under the circumstances where the building itself is enlivened. They can witness directly what is going on around them. And yet the chaos of the State House, I think you can all fully appreciate, is a challenge. And it isn't very, we find we have 3 volunteers right now that are up to this kind of tour. So it is mostly for the purposes of just making sure that our robust civics education program can be on a good foundation, that such a person, a part-time paid position, could help prop up our volunteers. By no means do we want to get rid of the volunteers. That's quite the opposite. They are the bulk of our volunteers in the summer and fall. Happily, the tourist season does not coincide with the legislative season. We've always enjoyed those 2 very different audiences, and consequently, it's a full-time job all the way through, but we are planning to still rely heavily on our volunteers.
So the head tour guide would be on the Sergeant at Arms staff. They would have oversight over all of the volunteers, and they would be sort of the backstop for all of those volunteers in terms of quality of the tour, support for them when they have questions. Today was a great example. We had a fire alarm go off. We had probably 30 or 40 students in the building. And thankfully Holly was giving that tour, but normally be a volunteer, and they might not know exactly what to do in that setting. So the head tour guide would be the support system for all of the volunteers. And it's a good problem to have because there's such an interest in coming to the building and learning about democracy and witnessing the legislature, learning about the building. It's a good problem to have, but David and I put a lot of thought into this and are confident that it is a system that can no longer be sustained on just volunteers. We do think we need a staff person who is within a chain of command to ensure that the program remain adequate to meet the demand that's coming our way.
So I know that you had said it's an unbenefited position. And you
Yes,
just give us an indication of the salary.
yes. So it's about 1,000 hours a year. And we put it, it was point factored by HR based on the duties to give it a range, a salary range. I think the top would be something like $25,000 a year. I'm going to glance over at Scott. Yes, $25,000 a year would be the cap. And it depends on the person that comes to us, what their experience is. But remaining within that 1,000, I think it's 1,020, below 1,020 hours is what keeps us on the unbenefited side.
Okay, very modest salary, in my opinion.
And just a couple of questions. So I didn't see in the materials a position description. I'm presuming there'd be a job description. Do you
Yes.
have that?
We do, and we can send that over.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then I guess I'm just curious because it seems like there's a lot of students in the building during the session, and this position would be more limited during the session. And so I'm just trying to figure out how that fulfills the program that you're talking about, David.
Limited. What are you suggesting about limited in terms of hours or?
The number of hours is lesser during the session than it is
Sure.
during the summer and fall when there's more tourists, but that's actually when most of the students come.
Correct.
And so I'm trying to figure out how that sustains or improves the program that you just spoke of.
I actually anticipate that the session is really when this position would kick in. So there would be more hours, I'm guessing, during the session season than during the traditional tour season, when we are less challenged, have more volunteers. In other words, the vast majority of our volunteers, frankly, don't want to do school tours. They are harder to do than your run-of-the-mill adult tours during the tourist season.
That's just not consistent with the information we received. It
Oh.
said that it would work primarily during the summer, fall, work more during the summer and fall.
Oh,
It'll be the final, we get a lot of tour groups in March and April for whatever reason. So we would flex their time up during that time.
right.
We have basically nobody here in the month of June, no volunteers in the month of June. So they would probably flex during that time
Yeah.
as well. A lot of the tour welcoming services during June fall, believe it or not, to the Capitol Police. They are the ones that are greeting people into the building. They do a fantastic job. We think that this person would not be used much during the summer. And then we would ramp them back up in the fall when
Yeah.
we are joyfully inundated with visitors.
So it's kind of dictated by the swings of demand through the season. So I didn't mean to suggest it wouldn't be at all during the tourist season, but it would follow the demand that Agatha is discussing.
Okay, did that satisfy your question?
It answered it.
With that said, is there further discussion of this?
Can I ask a question? Are you going to be asking for motion about this position, or is that just within the context of our budget motion?
There is a separate motion for the position.
Okay, so I feel uncomfortable voting on a motion until I have understood I have questions about the budget, and this is within the budget. So creating a position necessitates us
Fair enough.
understanding the budget
So you're saying you'd like to move on the agenda past that and we could ask. the
and come
question.
back to it.
Yeah.
If that's all right.
That's all right, Agatha?
That's absolutely.
Okay,
I'll leave some of these with Aaron and just hand out to you in the audience that are here present, but this is a very cool material that was just produced. It relates to the State House and our fourth graders that come to visit us, hot off the press.
Hot off the press. These are given to every student who visits. We developed this with the Friends of the State House, the Secretary of State's office. Those are the partners that we've always worked with.
Great.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dave.
Thank you.
So we will come back to the motion for this part-time position. But that brings up the reallocation of positions, restructuring. So I'll ask Bryn Hare to come up. Would you like Scott to come up as well, or
Absolutely, if you'd like to. He's welcome.
why not? So we are here, correct me if I'm wrong, we're following the departure of Mike Ferran. We are still putting together a new way to cover those duties and split them up.
That's right. So I'm going to set the table a little bit with a little history to just orient you all to what's happening here. So, but I am here to present the recommendation from your staff directors regarding the restructuring of the Office of Legislative Operations. So to provide a little bit of context, I'm just going to briefly describe the recent organizational evolution of your General Assembly staff. So 5 years ago, staff were organized into 5 distinct offices, and those were the House Clerk, the Senate Secretary, the Sergeant at Arms, Office of Legislative Counsel, and JFO. At that time, Legislative Counsel encompassed IT services, committee services, and operations staff. Around 2020, a restructuring initiative separated IT services into its own office, while committee services and the administrative operations staff were consolidated into a new office called the Office of Legislative Operations. Just prior to last session, the 2025 session, the Director of Operations departed for another position. And given the timing, your directors determined that conducting an immediate search to replace the director position was impractical, and instead we transferred the remaining operations staff to the supervision of Scott Moore here on an interim basis. And that allowed us to have more of a comprehensive opportunity for more significant analysis of the restructuring at the conclusion of the session. So your directors collaborated throughout the summer to develop a restructuring plan, which has now been implemented and is currently operational. So the operations unit previously consisted of 4 positions: the director position, 3 supporting staff members, and then your committee assistants. So I'd say 4 year-round full-time staff positions, but then also the seasonal committee assistants as well. So the unit's primary functions were committee support and administrative support, which encompassed both fiscal responsibilities like the expense reports, payments, vendor processing, and then more general administrative tasks. So the restructuring addresses those functions as follows. The fiscal support responsibilities have been transferred to JFO, along with 1 staff position from that former operations unit. And the committee services and administrative support functions have been transferred to the Office of Legislative Counsel, along with the remaining 2 full-time positions, staff positions. So that reorganization aligns the functional responsibilities with the offices already performing related work. And it also maintains continuity without disruption to legislative operations. So I'll mention that currently the operations director position is still, and Scott will speak to this too, is still within the legislature's business unit. And myself and Catherine are going to see how the session goes with just 3 of those full-time positions instead of 4, but keep that position in reserve.
Anything you'd like to add, Scott?
Good morning, Scott Moore, Legislative Finance Manager for the Joint Fiscal Office. Just speaking to what Bryn just mentioned, essentially last session and this next coming session, we're going to try to do the work of 4 people with 3 and a bit. And that bit is my extra duty. So instead of some of the fiscal analyst duties I had been doing, I'm going to be doing a little bit more business manager stuff. So the idea is hopefully this session, no one in any of the Joint Fiscal or Legislative Council is going to be spread too thin. And looking at the FY28 budget, we can dissolve the the money we had budgeted for Mike's old position. Right now, we do have a little bit of money in there just in case we need it for FY 27. We will reevaluate once we're done this session to see how it goes.
Can I just, is it correct to say that this is already operationally in place and we are blessing that arrangement?
That's correct.
Okay. Discussion or questions? Representative Wu.
So I just, thank you for the update on, you know, how things are moving around or have moved around. And just speaking from one individual legislator, I think it's, you know, I just felt like it's been supportive and had the things get done that we needed to get done, at least on our end. So my question is about the former director, the former position. So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So you want to hold the position in case you maybe think you might need it in the future. And are you also holding the resources? Because that's the part that was unclear from what something Scott just said. So, or are you spending those resources in other ways?
By resources, do you mean the budgeted amounts?
The amount that was set aside for salary benefits, et cetera, for that
So
position.
essentially, we have the positions still in the legislative business unit. That position is not funded with salary or benefits the way that a director position would be. But that position does have a smaller salary and benefit amount attached to it with the anticipation that if we need to fund that position in FY 27, we would have that resources to do that funding. But
So you have utilized some of the resources that previously were associated with that position in this budget to fund other things.
correct. To fund other things and or not increase as much as we might need to. Looking at, for instance, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the Pay Act had a 5.4% increase in salaries across the board. Well, when you remove a director's position, that salary, that's a larger salary, which would not get that 5.4% increase. So therefore, our total increase for the budget for FY 27 is less than it could have been had we still funded that position at a full director level.
So I guess the bottom line for me comes down to, so I understand that you didn't allocate the 5.4% increase and then the resulting FICA and all of that other stuff to that position because that position's not filled. I'm trying to understand if that's the only thing or if you have taken any portion of that salary and used it for, you know, other expenses that are here. So in other words, if we needed, if next year we decide we needed to fill that position, would you be coming back and asking for an increase in that line item in order to fill that position? Or would you say you had sufficient resources to do that?
Looking at this position, the reality is we were comparing it to what a fiscal analyst might make, because if anybody's going to be spread too thin, it would probably be JFO because we've only picked up that one position. And a lot of these duties would fall on my shoulders. So if we were needing to fill that position, it would live with JFO. So we funded it at the same level amount as an average fiscal analyst would make. So therefore, I believe we would have the same resources we would need if we had to hire another person.
Can you tell me what the difference is? In other words, the difference is used for other things.
Right.
You know, whether it was the staff salary increases or, you know, whatever across the board. What's the difference between what it is that you have it in the budget for and what it was previously funded at?
Previously, with salary and benefits, the position was approximately $225,000 total. In the current budget, we would have, you have in front of you FY 27, salary and benefits is only $100,000.
So 125,000 roughly,
Roughly.
give or take,
Yeah.
is offsetting other expenses.
Correct. So you have, and I'm getting a little bit into my presentation, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
healthcare, that's okay. Healthcare benefits would go up 5% for the rates. Your internal service fund costs are going to go up 3%, those things. So had we had the full 225,000, give or take, in there, we would be looking at an additional 125,000 to this plus 5.4% on top of that. So the 100,000 would include, I suppose, arguably you would say it was originally 95,000, then we added 5%, whatever it was, to get to 100. So the round number is 100. But the idea is we would not have as much to spend for that position. So therefore, we were able to reduce the overall fungible nature of cash for our other expenses.
Thank you.
Further discussion from anyone else? I don't see a hand up on the screen. We do need a motion for this to approve the restructuring. That includes, as you'll hear in the motion, whatever statutory changes might be needed would be included in the BAA. Can I entertain a motion? So,
I'll do it again. I move approval of the reallocation of positions and restructuring of legislative operation functions as presented, and that any necessary statutory changes be included in the Budget Adjustment Act.
Speaker has moved approval of that motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd ask the secretary to call the roll.
Senator Clarkson, Senator Beck, Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof, Representative Wood,
Yes.
Speaker Kowinski,
Yes.
Senator Baruth.
Yes.
5-0-3.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Brennan. Scott, you'll stay with us for this next piece, which you've alluded to, the overall budget. We have in front of us some of those documents, but feel free to tell us what we need.
Hopefully, I'm going to be referring to the memo that I had created, so hopefully you'll have that in front of you. But before we get too much into the budget, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the budget process in general. Every August, the governor issues some budget instructions to give us some guidance and direction when we develop the budget. This year, those budget instructions, they came out in August, and they include items such as consideration of only increasing the base budget from one fiscal year to the next by about 3%. They also include 5% increase in healthcare plans. Also includes an estimated 3% increase in the internal service fund costs. That is an estimate. They will have final numbers for us in the next couple of weeks. So these numbers here is an estimate for internal service fund costs. Might go up, might go down. The past couple of years I've done this, they've gone up another $3,000 or $4,000 from this budget. Once we have those budget instructions, in the months of September and October, I meet with all the department heads and we talk about their budget. When I go into these meetings, I really discuss with them in my head two questions. First of all, does everyone have the resources that they need to do the jobs that they're asked to do to service the state of Vermont? And the second question I keep in my head is there any place we can trim anything? Right. Sometimes we can trim 5,000 here, 5,000 there, and we can, as I talked about before, looking at Mike's old salary, we can have it and be able to still have the resources we potentially might need, but also save a big chunk of money. Once we have done that initial meeting, we do have discussions as to, is there anything else that might be needed? For instance, Agatha mentioned having another tour guide position, which is included in this budget. So going through and after all that process, we have a total of $974,000 increase from the FY26 to FY27 budgets. On page 1 of my memo, you'll see that here in the middle highlighted 974,000, which is a 3.97% increase. Now, I do want to point out, if you were to look at the paragraph above, it does say the FY26 legislative branch budget was $26,044,000 and change. But then I have a line item that says less the FY 2026 one-time appropriation of $1.5 million. If you remember at the end of the session last year, the request was made to increase the legislative budget by $1.5 million. And this was anticipation of some costs that we were looking at, such as the mezzanine project, which was estimated between $1 and $1.5 million. Replacing the cameras which we lost in the flood. Now, I guess there would be FEMA ability to fund those cameras, but at the same time, we needed to get the cameras purchased and installed. Also, if you recall, the session ran a little bit longer than we budgeted last session, and every week is approximately $300,000 in legislator expenses and salary, not staff, but just legislators. And
Did you say 300,000? I always thought it was, a week was more like 40 or 50,000.
for the Senate, but I'd have to go look and double check exactly how the breakout is, but between the Senate and the House, salaries and expenses. The average that we spent last year was actually $299,990 and change. So the average is 300,000 basically. So anticipating added, 3 or 4 weeks. The request was to add $1.5 million to the budget. Now, testimony at the time was, this is a one-time appropriation to add to the base. It is not increasing the base forever. So I wanted to compare apples to apples. And so I backed out that 1.5 million. If you recall testimony, it was, this is one time. We're not going to be doing this forever. This is just to meet some of these immediate goals of expenses that we're seeing. So therefore, the FY26 adjusted budget would be $24.5 million. And then the FY27 budget would be $25.5 million, or roughly $974,000 increased over the FY26 budget. Now, part of my portfolio as a joint fiscal office is to look at the capital bill. And as part of the capital bill, what we do is we look back at one-time appropriations that are 2 years old or older. And we say, is this appropriation finished? Is there anything more that we need to spend? Can we take some of this money back and put it back to the general fund? And that same mentality has come over here to the budget. I looked at all appropriations across the branch that were 2 years old or older. And I was able to find some money, not a lot, but $17,065 were some one-time appropriations of things that either we weren't going to use and or leftover money. Quite frankly, the $65 was leftover appropriation that hadn't been spent. So putting those together and adding this reversion to the budget, you can make the claim that the percent change after reversions, it's only a 3.76% increase over the FY26 adjusted budget.
Scott, that seems to me like the lowest increase that I remember in the last few years. Is that?
Last year was about 7.5%. The year before was, I think, 8%, something like that. I have to double check my numbers, but this is the lowest increase that I have experienced in my role here.
Yeah. Representative Wood.
You immediately look to your right. I'm not sure why, but okay. So my question is, I think I asked this question last year as well in terms of the reversion. So we know we had an unfilled position coming back to the legislative operations director again, which obviously is a substantial position. So why are we not reverting some of that money back?
So it really speaks to what we talked about before. The FY26 budget did include the salary and benefits for the entire position. I believe Mike gave his resignation like today, a year ago today, basically. So the budget process was after we'd already met and talked about this, so that budget was already in there. So arguably we could revert $100,000 for that salary. Or we can just look at that and say, we're going to spend some of that money elsewhere. So for instance, if we look at our total healthcare costs, our total operating expenses, our total fungible nature of all the money, all the cash, the $100,000, and if we reverted it and had $117,000, then the increase would be $1,074,000, because we still need that $100,000, 125 give or take, to fund the other aspects of what we're looking at for the budget.
I'm talking about one-time money that wasn't spent in FY26.
Right.
So I'm not talking about ongoing or money that's in the base, which you've kept the whole thing in the base essentially. part of it being used for those expenses you just said. So I guess my question is, what happened to the $250,000 that was in there last year for the salaries and benefits for FY '26?
Well, keep in mind, remember that the FY '26 budget is July to June. And we have, I was going to say we're only halfway through the fiscal year, so we should have spent half.
Right.
But the reality is we are session heavy. So a lot of the expenses that we're going to have are going to be starting next month.
So this actually might not appear until when we're looking at next year's budget.
Correct. Next year's budget, we may say,
That's,
hey.
that's the real answer. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Scott? Senator Lyons?
Yeah, so I'm looking at, obviously with the transfer, there's a huge change for Ledge Council. This is not your question, or it is your question. But the legislative amount goes down 3.404, and the increase is 19. Can you just talk a little bit about the sort of the balance of increase for Ledge Council as compared with, the transfer and the decrease that we're seeing there? It seems, even with that, it seems like it's a larger increase.
Of course, Senator Lyons, I'm happy to. Anyone following along, Senator Lyons is referring to the Appendix A that's on page 4 of the memo. What I tried to do to make the budget process as transparent as possible is to show what would have happened to the budget had no legislative operations been changed. So essentially, if you're looking at the top part of this appendix, we can see these are the dollar amounts with the 5.4% Pay Act, the 5% increase in healthcare plans, the 3% increase in the internal service fund costs, all of the things we've talked about, including Agatha's position of $25,000 for the head tour guide. That's all baked into this top part, as if nothing had happened. The committee assistants stayed where they were. We didn't move any of the other positions around to Ledge Council and/or to joint fiscal. And you can see that it's roughly between 3% and 4% in each individual business unit. Then we look at the second section here, which is the same budget, but this does include changes to legislative operations. Essential legislative operations costs, it's about $900,000 that we're moving back and forth. So we're going to take $900,000 out of the first line, the legislator line, which is the General Assembly. And we're going to put approximately $777,000 into Ledge Council and approximately $123,000 into joint fiscal. And then it's just a matter of percentages. So if we look at the initial increase for Ledge Council, $163,000, I'm looking at the top part of this appendix, $164,000, plus the $777,000, we're getting a $940,000 increase on the base budget from FY '26, which was the 4.9 billion initial adjusted appropriations. One is under Clarkson. So that's why when we look at Ledge Council being a 19% increase, it's because of the $900,000, $940,000 increase on that lower amount of only the $4.8 million. It's just a matter of percentages. And the same
Okay,
thing with,
thank you. Yeah, it's good.
same
No,
thing
I
with
got it. I do have another question. I don't know
Of
who
course.
can answer this, but it's regarding our legislative council and comparative salaries with executive branch lawyers out of the AG's office. And are our Ledge Council folks paid consistently and appropriately? Has there ever been a comparison with the assistant AGs that work administratively? That's a Bryn Hare question.
We can ask Bryn to the table.
So for the record, Bryn Hare, Legislative Council Director and Chief Counsel. So currently there is, as this committee knows, there is a compensation analysis underway with a consultant whose expertise is in exactly this, doing an analysis of the legislative staff compensation, comparing it to other organizations within state government and without, to make sure that your staff are compensated appropriately and in line with the market. So that work is still underway. And my understanding is that it is reaching the phase where recommendations from the consultant are going to be coming to leadership in the coming weeks. So I would say that analysis is being done right now by a consultant.
Thank you. I hadn't remembered that, so this is a great, this is great to know. Thanks a lot.
Representative.
I'm sorry. So is there any estimate of potential impacts financially included in this budget?
At this point in time, there isn't, only in that we don't know what the compensation study is going to return to us. So this is our estimate based upon our current environment for salary and benefits, but the compensation study might come back and needing more money for salaries or needing less money. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure we're not going to decrease anybody's salary. Thanks.
Okay,
So I apologize for being late. Judicial rules ran very late. And it needed to be there. Do we have to act on this at this moment?
yes, we do.
What's our ability to amend the budget?
Well, my hope is that leadership has taken a look at this. We're sharing it with the committee now. We have people to answer questions. I wouldn't see the need to delay that.
But
This has come up before, so sort of indirectly, and it was the chair of Senate Appropriations was on this committee, and it was kind of troublesome to her when you guys were working on a budget because she was going to be reviewing it. So you are looking at proposing a budget. It is not locked in. It can be changed throughout the process. It can be changed. It can be changed throughout the process. There'll eventually, you're making a proposed budget for the legislative branch. The governor will give his speech and give you what his version is. The House will then introduce a bill, which may or may not, depending on what happens overall with numbers, but there has to be a starting block somewhere, and you are approving this as the starting block, and it'll go through the process. And just like any other budget, you are not locked. If you vote for this budget here today, you're not locked in voting for the budget when you're on the Senate floor.
so it's like everything else. It can be amended as we go.
And there will be, in the motion, there's a specific provision if there are substantial changes that comes to the chair and the co-chair, and we would then call another meeting to discuss those changes.
Right.
So,
For instance, if to Representative Wood's point, if the compensation study comes back tomorrow and says we need an extra $3 million, $8 million, $20 billion, whatever it is, this would have to change.
Right.
But I don't know when they're going to come back to us.
So that's what my question was getting to, and Teresa's question was getting to also. So good to know it's a process, and we can weigh in as it
For the record, I don't think it's going to be $10 billion. That was,
well, maybe it will. Who knows?
I hope not.
Are you looking for motion?
I am looking for a motion at this point in the absence of further discussion.
There's a written motion you can, that's attached to your packet, Senator, if you.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Anyone can, it doesn't have to be Senator Close.
I would move it. I'm happy to move it. Happy to help, given how late I am. I might as well do something good. Here, I move to support the proposal.
Sorry to interrupt. I see Representative Lyons' hand up and.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Ginny, I thought you had your questions answered.
I just got promoted.
Senator, yeah.
This is Senator Lyons.
Sorry. We're
You're
gonna
in the
have.
house, Jenny, anytime you want to be there.
So my question is going back to something Rep. Wood brought up earlier. So by approving this full budget, then we are also then approving the position in the Sergeant at Arms office.
I will be calling for a separate motion for that.
Okay, good. That just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, good.
So,
Want me to continue now?
please continue.
Okay, I move to support the proposed fiscal year 2027 legislative branch appropriation as presented to the Joint Legislative Management Committee on December 12th, 2025. And require that the joint fiscal office notify the chair and vice chair of any substantial changes prior to release of the executive branch budget recommendation to determine whether formal review by the committee is necessary.
So Senator Clarkson has moved, as you just heard. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, I would ask the secretary to call the roll.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof, Representative Wood,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Beck, Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Speaker Kowinski,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
602.
Thank you. So as I just alluded, we moved over a previous possibility for a motion to create the part-time year-round unbenefited position for the Sergeant at Arms office, the head tour guide. So we will return to that now. Is there any further discussion of that motion? I polled Representative Wood and she was fine with moving to this now. Any further discussion? Senator Clarkson.
Why is it unbenefited? Do you just mean no additional benefits like legislators? Or do you mean unbenefited like no compensation?
It's paid, but there will not be the benefit package like healthcare.
Like legislators, okay, so it's equal footing with us.
Sort of seasonal positions.
Got it. Like our committee assistants and yeah.
Okay, if that concludes discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we accept,
Here.
am I wrong? We have to say this.
It's all written out for you.
I know, but I haven't gotten that far in the package.
You-
I move the creation of one part-time year-round unbenefited position for use by the Sergeant at Arms for a head tour guide.
Senator Clarkson has moved the creation of this part-time position. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I would ask the secretary to call the roll.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Beck, Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof, Representative Wood,
Yes.
Speaker Kowinski,
Yes.
Senator Baruth,
Yes.
602.
Great. So let me thank the Sergeant at Arms, David Sheets, Scott, Bryn, and JFO, everyone for helping us with all of these things. Those policies have taken quite a lot of staff time and I'm appreciative of that. I don't think we have any other business. And I believe if we adjourn now, we will be closer to Secretary's estimate than my Chief of Staff's estimate. So I will make that move. With that, I think our business is done.